Have you ever heard one line in a movie that just lodged itself in your brain and never left? Not a speech, not some motivational dude hollering at a crowd, just one sentence. Maybe it changed the way you looked at people. Maybe it changed how you handled fear, money, marriage, or even your own failures. For me, one of them was from the movie City Slickers. Do you remember that movie? Mitch asks Curly, "Do you know what the secret of life is?" Curly holds up one finger and says one thing. Just one thing. You know that hamster's been running on the wheel in my brain for about 35 years now? One thing. Golly gee whiz. So let me ask you something, and I mean it. I'm actually curious. What's the one movie line that changed the way that you think? Hold that thought. We'll come back to it. Because here's the thing. Life changes. The world changes. And whether we like it or not, it keeps moving forward. I had a hard enough time surviving the jump from vinyl to 8 tracks to cassettes, cassettes to CDs, CDs to streaming. And somewhere along the way, the phone became a camera. The camera became a computer, and the computer somehow ended up living in our pocket. And that's just technology. What else changes? People change, jobs change, relationships change, and the rules change. The world you grew up slowly becomes the world you used to know. And if you're not paying attention, one day you'll wake up and realize that you're walking around with a map that no longer matches the territory. That's true whether you're 20, 40, or 60. Here's something I've learned over the years. Getting older doesn't mean you suddenly have your life figured out. It just means that every morning starts off with a noise that sounds like you just stepped on a bag of potato chips. And it just means that I've made enough mistakes to finally start recognizing a few patterns. A whole lot of people are out there trying to figure out life with nobody in their corner. I understand that because I lived it. I grew up before the internet, before Google, before YouTube, before you could put a little electronic device out of your pocket and have the answer to dang near any question your little heart desires in 10 seconds. A lot of us learn things the hard way, sometimes through experience, sometimes from failure, sometimes from consequences, and sometimes from listening to people who had absolutely no business giving advice in the first place. Welcome to The Useful Man. My name is Liam James Miller. I'm 60 years old, married, honorably discharged combat veteran, and a guy with way too many hobbies. I got a master's degree and somehow an author of 10 books. Have you ever heard the expression, jack of all trades? Well, that's me. That should be my alter ego name, Jack. I'm jack of all trades, master of none. Are you telling me that you're a jack of all trades too? That's awesome. We should start a club. You would think that being a jack of all trades would come with some really cool abilities, but unfortunately, well, not. Look, I still lose my car keys at least once a week, so don't go making the mistake that thinking that I got this whole thing figured out. But I've learned a few things, and that's what we're going to talk about here. Learning, growing, adapting, and becoming more capable. Useful. Figuring out how to stay useful in a world that gets a little stranger by the day. Now, I'm not a guy sitting around in a recliner, sipping brandy and reading classic literature all day. For that matter, any day. I read field manuals, repair manuals, tech manuals, and the heating instructions on frozen food for the microwave, which, by the way, I want to start a petition regarding frozen burritos. Can someone please explain to me why you put a frozen burrito in the microwave and after the ding, one end is still frozen and the other end is hot enough to melt a trailer hitch? That's burrito roulette. Anyway, I like learning how to build things, fix things, improve things, and survive the occasional microwave burrito. And somehow, all that turned into books. Now, I mentioned I have a master's degree, so before you start picturing me in a tweed jacket, smoking a pipe, and using words nobody understands, let me clear something up. That degree didn't magically make me smarter. I still lose things. I still tell bad jokes. I still stand in the dark trying to figure out whether I'm holding a black sock or a blue one. And before you ask me why I'm standing in the dark, my wife is still asleep. She's a wonderful woman, but let's just say she's not familiar with the dawn. And after nearly 30 years of marriage, I've learned something important. Trying to determine sock color in the dark is inconvenient, yes, but waking her up at 5 in the morning is dangerous. So there I am, squinting at socks, like a confused archaeologist trying to make life decisions without becoming the reason somebody wakes up angry. Nevertheless, I still get up. I go to work every morning. I have the same friends, and I still manage to irritate roughly the same number of them in roughly the same amount of time every day. So the degree didn't change who I am. And all it really proved is that I'm stubborn enough to stick around with something long enough to finish it. That's about it. Okay, that's enough about me. Let's talk about why you're here and why am I making these videos. I'll get into more of my background in future episodes, but right now, there's something that you need to know. I didn't grow up with a father figure in my life. Not exactly earth-shattering news. I get it. There wasn't an adult man around to give me a good swift kick in the rear end when I needed one. Nobody smacked me upside the head and said, "Boy, what in the Sam Hill are you doing? Don't do that. Do this instead. You're about ready to make a mistake." I didn't have any of that. What I learned on my own, sometimes from friends, which I should have known better in the first place to ask. And if I'm being honest, I learned most of it the hard way, by failing, repeatedly, sometimes spectacularly. In fact, if you look up the word failure in the dictionary, there's probably a little picture of me next to that word. I've screwed things up royally more times than I care to admit. But here's the upside. Every single time life knocked me flat on my backside, I got back up. Sometimes I got right up, right away. But if there was an outcome I wanted, I stayed after it. I dusted myself off, adjusted course, kept moving. And here's where it gets interesting. I had two roads I could have taken. I could have swallowed all the mess that happened in my life and let it turn me bitter, angry, and hateful. I could have spent the rest of my days dragging around old baggage like a man hauling a broken transmission uphill. A lot of people do that. Or I could try to turn some of those mistakes into something useful. Because whether we admit it or not, most of us are fighting the same battles. Heartbreak, confusion, money problems, failure, loss, self-doubt. If you've never made a YouTube video before, there's a lot of self-doubt. So trying to figure out where we fit in on this third rock of the sun. Trying to figure out where we're going. Trying to figure out whether we're completely screwing the whole thing up or not. The details change. The people change. The circumstances change. But human beings, we haven't changed nearly as much as we like to think. We have better toys, but we still haven't figured this thing out. That's what this channel is about. It's not pretending that life is easy. I'm not pretending I've got all the answers. I'm not pretending every problem gets solved with a motivational quote and a cup of coffee. It's about learning, growing, getting more capable, making fewer avoidable mistakes. And for me, sharing some of the lessons that took me a lifetime to learn. Some of what we will cover will be practical. Some will be uncomfortable. Some of it might even step on your toes a little bit. Well, mine too. You should see me dance. But if you're willing to stick around, I think we're going to figure out some interesting things together. Now, remember that question I asked you earlier at the start? The one about the movie line. Here's where it comes back around. I want you to write it down in the comment section, okay, where I can see it and where others can see it. And do me a favor, if you scroll through and see somebody else put something that hit you square in the chest, tell them, reply to them. I'd like this to be a place where men can actually talk to each other for once. If enough of you do this, I'll come back and we'll go through the best ones together. The lines that quietly shaped how man lived, the ones that stuck. Because I've been chewing on that city slicker scene for a long time now, 35 years, give or take. There's this old curly holding up one finger, one thing, and I've been gnawing on it ever since. Not because I think I found the answer, quite the opposite. Because the older I get, the more I realize life isn't about finding one perfect answer and riding off into the sunset. It's about asking better questions. What matters? What doesn't? What are you building? What are you chasing? And is it actually worth the price you're paying for it? Maybe that's the real mystery. Maybe the point was never that Curly knew my one thing. Maybe the point is that each of us had to figure out our own. And maybe that search never really ends. So if you're willing to stick around, we're going to talk about a lot of things here. Money, relationships, goals, failure, success, the mistakes that teach us something, and mistakes that do actually leave dents in the fender. But underneath it, we're really circling the same question. What makes us a useful man? Next time, we're going to talk about something that didn't even exist when I was a kid, but probably has caused more trouble than bad decisions, bad relationships, and cheap tequila combined: the internet. Because somewhere along the way, people stopped asking one very important question. Should I post this at all? We're going to talk about privacy, restraint, and reputation, and why 6 seconds of emotion can sometimes create 6 years of consequences. Trust me, that conversation is long overdue. Now, apparently, I'm supposed to remind you to hit that like button. So there, consider yourself reminded. Stop treating it like it's a launch code. And by the way, call your mother. She worries more than she admits. I'll catch you on the next one.